Saidi and Willis Raburu, you tuned into the Rhythm Junction on Hot 96. The time now is 11:25 in the AM, and we're talking matters family planning. Form Nigani Youth Movement is in the studio with us today. Tough questions that we're asking, tough things that we are learning, that even counting your days is family planning. It seems though that, it is planning.
Yeah, because you're planning the
natural way. Let's just say you're planning the natural way.
Shout out to Imu, my boy.
For young people, though, family planning, especially young unmarried people, can be a challenge because there's a lot of inconsistency. You know, you might have your partner today, something happens, then you decide that you're not having anybody, and then something happens again. Planning for such a pattern can be tough.
Yeah, it is. I think it's very, very difficult, especially, like you said, when you are unmarried. And the two most common forms of family planning at that level is either the P2 or the condoms, or going natural, as Raburu says that he counts his days.
Natural.
So I think
Raburu counts his days.
I'm like, okay, Raburu, we could talk more about this after the show.
Wow. I want to say for the record that when me and my wife, we are one.
Oh, okay.
So if she is counting,
you also count.
No, that is clear now.
Okay.
We are counters, not over the counter.
Not over. So I think the discussion should be taken, especially to the young people, the young and married, because the myth has always been that family planning is for the 50s and above. It's for the older generation. But we forget that every decision you make as a young person will affect you when you are in your 50s.
But what mode of family planning can this young person use? Because are you going to use a morning after pill every morning?
And is a morning after pill?
Is it
family planning?
Yeah, is it okay? Is it family planning? And is it right for you to use a morning after pill every morning? So what mode of
that's why we need that's why the movement came about because we need to take that discussion to the young people. That's why we are even here at Hot 96, because you touch the hearts of the youth. You know, that discussion should be taken there, and then we should come up with ways, because also family planning is entrenched in the Constitution. These are things that are legal, they're binding, and we just need to up the game, and ensure that we know which methods to use, when to use them.
Which methods do we use, people? Yes.
Na mimi nataka nijibiwe hiyo swali yangu
ya counting the days.
Ya P2.
Yep.
Nerima, maybe Michael.
Because the thing about even when this discussion that we're having, you talked about how people who are unmarried and the different partners that they have.
Yeah.
Are these even discussions that we do have? Because we assume, especially culturally, that if you're unmarried, you're not even supposed to be having those kind of relationships.
Yeah.
And that's where religion comes in. So it's even difficult to start talking about the morning after pill. Because you shouldn't be doing this to begin with, according to our culture, our tradition, and our religion. So you see a lot of women feeling guilty of even purchasing it, so they do it in secret. But when you go to universities or even pharmacies, you see how fast the morning after pill goes, which should be scary. Because not only are we talking about you taking the pill, it means you're having unprotected sex. And so that goes now into how many partners are you having? And then we're talking about what are the likely diseases. And so when we're talking about the planning, it's not just taking that medication to save you from pregnancy. It's about taking care of yourself. We're talking about the kind of diseases you're exposing yourself to. We're talking about not only the harm you're taking on your body, because I don't know, I don't have the statistics to tell you whether it does harm, especially when you take it continuously. But it's something that's to be taken in emergencies. But when people take it every time, then that means there's no planning.
Okay. Yes. Okay. You mentioned, Nerima, that you have to find what works for you.
Right.
Where and how do young people get this information of, this is what works for me, and how do you even get...
I would say, being introduced to it firsthand is overwhelming. Yeah. And then you'd start conversation with health practitioners, even in a clinic or in hospitals or anything like that within your community, your neighborhood. There's a healthcare practitioner who you can speak to. And then you're the only one who understands how your body works. There are some women who have a lot of hormones, some don't have so much. And then there are different kinds of hormones that would work for you. Because I know for me, for instance, I prefer natural method of counting days than having medication, just because I know that the kind of body that I have is very difficult for me to stick to medication. But there are also other women who use systems like IUDs, where they place them or insert them in their bodies for up to 5 years. And for some women, that's just too scary. Or taking a birth control pill every day. For some women, it's just too hard to keep up with. But for others, it works for them.
So this is information you could get at any health facility, government health facilities, clinics, dispensaries. Okay.
Yes, that's accessible.
There's a question, and I like that there are men in the building. Because again, just to go through some of the comments, kuna unasema nauliza watoto tukae wapi? Mwingine anasema hivyo. Somebody says diapers are very expensive. That's Terry. Steve Mutua says if we must discourage family planning because according to him the death rate is soon going to be high due to, and he jokes about it, the consumption of mercury. And then Margaret Mumo says she's following for herself. Omaria Kenneth says he's the one who said it's the right time for the 6th baby. Lizzie says she's also following the conversation. But Priska, who also said hi to Nerima, goes on to raise a very interesting question, and that's a discussion I was having with my good friend Anyiko as well. She says, I wonder why it's always the female to go for family planning.
It's true.
Yeah. Apart from jeez, all the females saying apart from the condom, which other methods can men use for family planning? Because lazima tusaidiane bana. And we were saying, because there's a time that you guys went to Pondi Street them, and you had bulikuwa ball. What if men were pregnant, for example? Would it be easier then to have this discussion? Because, and then again, would you, maybe even the females, you can go to the hashtag Raburu and Lulu Hot, would you trust your man to take the pill every day?
That's a pregnant question. While we are at pregnancies and how to prevent them. No, I think lots of stuff. But I think we started the conversation with Luke talking about some of the myths out there,
right?
Or misinformation generally. Is that family planning is a conversation for women, and the responsibility for family planning is women. And I think given our society, patriarchy, etc., or mfumo dume. Even I know that. I crammed that just for the record. So there's an assumption that it's women's responsibility, and I think that is one thing that we really need to debunk. Yeah. And Willis, you intimated that we need to have honest conversations when you are in relationships, whether married or not. Like Nerima said, the fact is that whether people frown upon sexual relationships outside of marriage or before marriage, the reality is that the sexual debut age is getting lower and lower. I think for Kenya, the conservative one is as early as 12. People are having sex. Or young girls who are pregnant at 12, they had sex with some male. So while the focus is on the question around women, I think the question you're asking is particularly important, that this is a joint responsibility. And why? Particularly because when you have a child, when you end up having a child, whether you are those who disappear as a man, the fact is that is a life-changing experience. You can run away from the child and responsibilities, but you can never erase the fact that you are a father. You have brought somebody into this world. So I think there has to be conversations between the people wherever they are involved. Number two, the thing about natural ways and counting days. I like what Raburu said, even on a lighter note, that when they are counting days, they are one. It's something that they are in this together. And I think that it means men have a role as well in the context of family planning or planning for their families. So when you count the safe days, it doesn't mean when madam or the government is on safe on other days wewe uko free unaenda kutafuta wenye hawana safe days, or so
unaenda kutafuta mahindi mix.
Exactly. So it is a commitment, a shared commitment. So I think men, the same thing we say, the natural, that would apply to men as well. And also, of course, we say the 100%, the surest way of avoiding early pregnancies, I don't like using unwanted, early pregnancies, is abstinence. And I think we should never forget that is one very powerful option as well. So we start with the 100% way is abstinence. If you can't do that, there are options. And Nerima raised finally something around the obsession with P2s and emergency. You can't have an emergency every day, every week, every month. It means you're a bad planner to begin with. Planning. So it means our women are more scared of pregnancy than other reproductive health issues that can come with being unduly exposed to not so good sexual relations. And I think young people need to have conversations. I think the medical facilities, clinics, etc. are important. Speaking with parents, if they can, is important. But I think if we influenced the knowledge and capacity of young people within their peer groups to be able to educate each other, I think that would be a more powerful tool, because a lot of it, whether we like it or not, comes from peer coaching, peer learning, and sharing. Yeah.
All right. Julius also says, my question comes like this: if you are really faithful to your partner, why are you planning? Because if I say I don't want to have more children, never, unless I don't mean it.
No, but you see, so the planning, I think, Willis, that's Julius, eh?
Yes.
You see, planning is not just about the children, but it's also what having children means. But it's also, when you bring a child into this world, if you had a sexual engagement and somebody ended up being pregnant, there's a child, there's a life. It speaks about responsibility. Now, there's nothing wrong with me having 10 children, Willis, if I can competently afford to give them an education they deserve, feed them, without feeling strained personally and the people around me. And I think that is clear. For me, the value of family planning, I have one daughter who is turning 5 in January, and I'm still discussing with the government whether so I'm leaving
you
this.
You can be given 5 more years.
So I think it is about the resources. And I said, first you owe those children the best life you can provide for them. Right. But number 2, you also owe yourselves a life that is not strained as you struggle so much. By the time you reach 50, you are so tired, you've not seen your 30s and 40s as a mother, as a father, because your entire life was about putting food on the table, school fees, taking loans, paying them, taking another one. So I think there are 2 things. One, you have a responsibility to ensure the children you bring to this world are not a burden to you and to society. You can provide for them. Number 2, you owe yourself a life that you bring children forth whom you can take care of without forgetting your own self.
I think that's interesting what you said about you owe yourself a life. For most of us, even when you grow up, you're usually told, once you have children, maisha yako inaisha. Unaanza kuishi maisha ya watoto wako. Yeah,
they might not admit it. We're like, man.
It is scary. You're like, hey, I don't think I'm ready for this. So it's good to know that you can still have both, and you should. And you get that through planning.
And children are life-changing, whether you like it or not. There's no books you can read that can tell you the reality of, in both good and not so exciting ways. It's just an irreversible thing. And the way life and the opportunities you have and the way you see things, the way you speed on the road, whether you are a Subaru driver or not, you start realizing, shit, if I become very dead, there's somebody will be an orphan.
Willis,
mentally, that is powerful.
Now I'm coming to work in 30 minutes. Not my regular.
And I think that's why the movement is very, very important, because we'll try as much as possible to influence the policymakers to ensure that family planning is more accessible and available to everyone, especially to young couples, because that's where most of it starts. You have a discussion on where you're going to live. You have a discussion on what you're going to eat on certain days. So you should also have a discussion on how many kids you're going to have for better future. We should not think like there's a certain politician who once told his people in quotes that we need to have more kids so that we can ensure the voting population. Yes. There are people definitely will listen to that guy and they'll give birth to as many kids as they can. But who's going to take care of those kids? Definitely not the politician. The only time they're going to come in is during election time, and then they disappear. Okay. Yeah. So we should. I think this is a discussion that should be taken even further and faster, because there's a lot at stake.
By the will is 67%, the conservative figure, 67% of young people are unemployed in a country where we have, is it 40% unemployment? So 67% of young people are unemployed, which means the burden, if they had children, more children than they can, is already being spilled over to the society and the government. And you know where we are economically, even as a government. If we fear loans and mortgaging our country to the Chinese, people are saying we have unsustainable loans. That is the same thing. If you have children, you cannot provide for. You will always have to feed them. You will always have to educate them. Where will these resources come from? So for young people, selfishly, we need to seriously think about what this unemployment data means for us, for a majority of young people, and therefore how do we realistically plan our life with this not so bright future or statistic. It can change, and I'm not saying that it will stay forever, but it will. It can change. It will change. It should change. But that is the reality we have right now. I was speaking this morning to a young person who graduated 3 years ago, and he's saying he's tired of tamarking. He wants to go for a master. So he was asking me, what would I propose? So we went into about 1 hour of conversation on phone. The reality is, whether formal employment or informal, this employment market is really bad.
That's right. Of course, I have in my many months together with Lulu, not seen her pay attention to a conversation.
Planning is important. Planning is important.
She's planning.
And you will see the video on YouTube, and you'll tell us where you can get this video. Also, Kiki is shooting.
And
Lulu is in the next link, Dixon. Just train Lulu mazako tu.
Iko focus. And Raburu.
Kwanza hapo place ulisema ati when you want to have 12 children.
Saitan.
And even if you look at it from a World Cup angle, when you go to Russia, the most populous countries are not there. China is not in Russia. The USA is not there.
Yes.
India is not there.
Yes.
And Nigeria, the most populous African country, they're failing us. They're losing.
So Lulu,
I'm taking notes, but
planning is indeed important.